Yeah, that's not clickbait. This is one of those things where every now and then you see a title and you think to yourself, there's no way that's true, right? I mean, that can't be possible. And yet, against insurmountable odds, Lost is a blind spot that has been there for me for a long, long time. It's something that goes back about 10, 15 years. When I was in school, I was starting to get more and more into TV shows, and I had it at the back of my mind that someday I will watch Lost. Well, recently in 2024, the show turned 20 years old and it was on Netflix. And so I decided to start watching the show. And so over the last 4 months, from September 2024 to January 2025, I've slowly made my way through Lost. I would watch some episodes at a time. Sometimes I would watch a couple of episodes, in a week or something like that. I was making my way slowly but surely, and there were some big seasons. And I wanted to talk about it because I figured, for posterity reasons, it made sense to then come on camera and say something. Here's an interesting thing also about this, which is I actually didn't know much about the show. In fact, I knew nothing past the basic premise. All I knew was that it was following a bunch of survivors of a plane crash on an island and they were trying to get out. That is the length and breadth of that entire story that I knew of. I had no idea what happens in it. I had no idea what kind of twists and turns came along the way. I didn't know anything about how it was going to end. And so watching it just now was an entirely new experience for me. And getting to experience it all like that with a fresh set of eyes was a lot of fun. I had a great time watching Lost. It is definitely worthy of all the praise that it's gotten over the years, and also the discussions that it has spawned over the years. It doesn't surprise me that this became such a contested show among some of the fandom, especially when it came to some of the story decisions that it made. But throughout the entire journey, just getting to see how all of it plays out and seeing these characters go from one point to another, discovering more of the island, realizing so many of their life's experiences and journeys have led to this moment and how it could potentially help them in what comes next. Just seeing all of those arcs come around was an incredibly fascinating experience. I came to care so much about these characters by the end of the series. I'm not going to do a play-by-play of the entire thing, though, because if I started that, we'd be here for about 6 hours, because there's just so much story that's packed into every single episode of Lost, especially when it comes to those characters, the flashbacks, and learning about how they got to this point, which makes the entire story so much more interesting, because when they take certain decisions as they're, trying to survive on the island after that, so much of it makes sense in context. It's like, now you're going to do something which is either going to mirror exactly that, or you're going to do something which is going against that decision that you made at one point, and find something to be better or worse about depending on how you look at it. And yet you still get to care about them, because each of them has had this tragic past that really connects you to them, and there's something that the show manages to make you connect to. For example, when you start the series, you start off with Jack Shephard, played by Matthew Fox, and as the series progresses, you learn more about his line of work, him being a surgeon in LA, and him being very good at his job, but he's also working with his father, Christian Shephard. And one day, when a surgery goes wrong, and it turns out Christian was drunk at that time, he goes to the medical board, and Christian gets his license revoked. Now, this is something that stings Jack for a while, because it also connects to how, relationships have gone down in his past before. He used to have a girl that he really loved. Eventually they got married, but then that relationship fell apart. He's gone through these highs and lows, these turbulent times, and so to be able to sort of, use his instincts of, and the lessons that he's learned along the way to try and be better is something that I found compelling about the character, and I thought Matthew Fox did a great job. And this applies more and more to the more extreme cases, like when you come to characters like Kate Austin or Sawyer, played by Evangeline Lilly and Josh Holloway. They're not people who are on the right side of the law when it comes to the stuff that they were doing. One of them is a con man, the other is a robber, and she's also accused of murdering her stepfather. And both of them are on the lam. They're both just trying to get by, but also there is something that is guiding them emotionally. Like, they are making decisions based on things that have happened to them and trying to find a better path out of it. like Sawyer is trying to find the con man that conned his family, and this is, these are different jobs that are potentially leading to that point, while also becoming really good at it himself. In the case of Kate, however, it's something that she wanted to help her mom with because the stepfather seemed to be a really terrible drunk. And so there are these things that motivate them, but then getting to see all of that just blow up in hell, and then all of these characters who have been through these terrible things end up on the same flight. This goes even further when you look at characters like Saeed Jarrah, played by Naveen Andrews, Hurley, played by Jorge Garcia, Jin and Sun Quan, played by Daniel Dae Kim and Yoon Jin Kim, and then, who is one of the more important characters of the entire series, John Locke, played by Terry O'Quinn. And so many times in the show, that also acts on the power of belief, on what exactly is happening with the island, because as they start to explore it, it gets weirder. Like, they first hear there's something over there, some kind of creature with this rattling noise that eventually turns out to be this black smoke that's going around. And they also find there's a polar bear in the forest, and these are weird occurrences. But then, as they go deeper and deeper, looking for a radio signal, they find one that's been looping for a long time that leads to someone named Danielle Rousseau. Eventually, she's warning about the others who seem to be out there, and they might be coming to get the other survivors of the crash, and so there's clashes that happen eventually as a result. There also seems to be a hatch that's in the ground leading somewhere, but it's firmly closed, and there are numbers on it, which are numbers that Hurley is familiar with because they're lottery numbers that he won with, and they caused him what he believes to be really bad luck. And so they become more superstitious for him. But throughout the time you're going through these early bits of the story, and then eventually you get down to the hatch and you realize that there's a button over there that if it's not pressed every 108 minutes, the world might end. Just that aspect of it, so much of it is built on this process of belief. Because as things get crazier, characters like John Locke, and eventually you meet someone named Echo, played by Adewale Akinnuegbahe, it's very clear that all of this stuff is as bizarre as it gets, but there is something that seems to be very tangible about it too. And something that the characters like Jack and all sometimes have a hard time reconciling with is, why would you believe in any of this? It actually leads to one of my favorite exchanges that happens in season 2 between Jack and Locke.
It's not real. Look, you want to push the button, you do it yourself.
If it's not real, then what are you doing here, Jack? Why did you come back? Why do you find it so hard to believe?
Why do you find it so easy?
It's never been easy!
The entire character of John Locke is in that line because he is someone who has been through something terrible. He's found out about his father finally, who's turned out to be this huge con man and has really messed up his entire life, his relationships, and then eventually to continue on with the con, he pushed John out of a window and paralyzed him. And now John seems to have a second lease at life when it comes to, doing more, especially when he can walk again on the island. And so everything for him has become this sort of miracle and like this something that has a higher purpose. So everything feels a little more big as a result. Like something as crazy as if you're pushing a button, the world will not end. It's like, really? I mean, that sounds crazy when you think about it, but at the same time, even you're thinking at the back of your head, what happens if you don't press that button? In one case, the button doesn't get pressed. It sets off an electromagnetic pulse of sorts that apparently crashes the plane. It's also at this point that you meet somebody that, going on a tangent over here, is one of my favorite characters, arguably my favorite character in the entire series, that being Desmond Hume, played by Henry Ian Cusick. This is a man who is living in the hatch, and he has been there for a while. And as the series progresses, particularly season 3 onwards till the end, he is someone who has a very crucial role to play in everything, because some part of him seems to be against whatever electromagnetic stuff is going on, and he's sort of living out of time in some ways. Like, he is able to realize certain things that other characters cannot see or cannot know, and it makes him a very mysterious character, but it also makes him an incredibly fascinating character. My favorite episodes of the entire series, in fact, some of them revolve around him. Probably, arguably, my favorite one being The Constant, where he is really affected by this thing and he doesn't know which time he's in. And his constant is he has to get to this girl he used to be in love with, Penny. And if he can get to her, he can tell her that he loves her and he can sort of get back to it. That entire journey that he goes through, though, trying to get to her, eventually meeting up with a character who could potentially help him named Daniel Faraday, who seems to have some idea of what this time displacement thing seems to be. It's incredibly fascinating. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I haven't even talked about most of the stuff that's happening on the island, especially when it comes to the other facilities that seem to be there as part of something called the Dharma Initiative. And you find out that this thing is an organization that seems to have been doing some experiments on the island because of all the bizarre things that seem to be going on over there. And there's an entire community that seems to be settled over there as well. And this is something that is being headed by Benjamin Linus, played by Michael Emerson. He's like that big connector piece to the entire thing, and there are so many things that are then explained as to these bizarre occurrences regarding either kidnappings or killings that are happening on the island, and sites that don't seem to be managed as well anymore, or because some people were there before and they're not there anymore, all because of him. You sort of like love to hate him, or vice versa, because every time you feel like, oh, this is the worst guy in the world, no redemption for you, you suck. Every now and then you're like, but he's also got a point here. It's very strange. They play morality cards so much with this show. One of the main characters who ends up from all of this is Juliet, and she's a character who, again, at first when you start off, you're like, I don't know if I trust you too much, I don't like you too much. But then, as the series progresses, especially when it comes to seasons 5 and 6, it gets a lot more interesting. And what I really also like, especially at the season 3 mark, is that you've been doing flashbacks. And then it had a thing happen at the season 3 finale where there is this part where you're seeing a moment with Jack in LA, and he seems to be at his wit's end. He's not doing super well. He looks completely off, and you're thinking this is a flashback. I remember the shock I had just now, though, and I can only imagine it happened when it was airing live, years ago, when you found out at the end of the episode when there's a car coming towards him, close to the airport. The car opens, someone comes out of it, and you're thinking to yourself, I wonder who this is, and it's Kate. And at that moment, I remember thinking, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. They knew each other. Oh, they got off the island. This is the oh shit. Yo, this is crazy. And then seasons 4 to 6 have a lot of flash forwards, which is when it really starts to mess around with this concept of, timelines and stuff like that. Again, incredibly fascinating. The idea goes from getting off the island to getting back to the island, which is where things become very interesting, especially when it seems like there might be a rescue party in play. And like I mentioned with the episode of The Constant, it's like now there's a shipping rig which is out there. It's like if we get there, if we follow this bearing, we should be able to, rescue a lot of people. Otherwise, it seems like there's someone coming to exterminate everyone on this island. And that turns out to be Charles Widmore, who is Penny's father, the girl who Desmond is in love with. And he wants to wipe out every trace of it because he staged the flight crash of 815. And the world thinks that the plane went down in the sea, no one survived. But the truth is, they're on the island. And eventually you start to play around, like I said, with time quite a bit, because there are eventually things happening when it comes to like electromagnetic activity on the island that is affecting, the location of the island, which leads into probably my favorite season, with season 5, because you end up with some of the characters in the 1970s and some of them are in present day, but there's these flashes going on in the island and they're ending up in random moments of time which are constantly shifting. But some of them connect to earlier episodes where a character will say something and you kind of go, oh, that's interesting. Now that scene from like season 1 or 2 makes so much more sense. It's like, what did that character see? So I like the fact that they had that major plan, set up as to how everything was going to happen. And eventually seeing the rise of the Dharma initiative and what they were working on, especially when it came to this concept of the energy on the island and what it could do. And you also got answers to other stuff, like what is that black smoke with coming into season 6, as well as who's Jacob. This is someone who keeps getting referred to all the time, especially from another character who they run into as part of the Others, named Richard Alpert, played by Nestor Carbonell. He is someone who seems to not age. He's been there for a long time, and you eventually find out what that mystery is. But again, that was a very interesting arc too, like just getting to understand all of that and more about the mythology of the island. You know who I haven't talked about in all of this, and I feel bad about this? I haven't talked about Michael and Walt. Michael is a character who, he's trying to be a better father to his son, and then Walt is taken away. But Walt seems to be seeing and knowing things about how things work on the island more than anyone else. He's sort of, he's got like this premonition sort of thing going on, which is very interesting. But Michael can't quite understand that. They have a dog, Vincent, and God bless, man. That Labrador has seen some shit in the entire time that this show has been going on. And again, really like that aspect of it. I mean, I can't say that I like Michael as a character too much at times, because he makes some decisions that are pretty messed up, especially when it comes to trying to save Walt at one point in season 2. There are some people who get killed in the process, which you probably don't want to see them get killed. But at the same time, the show finds a way to deal with all of that too. And I think it dealt with it fairly nicely. I think there are some interesting things with Walt that, especially as you watch towards the series finale and then the epilogue that came out with the DVD of season 6, those things explain a lot more. So season 6 starts off with a very different flash forward, with it somewhat being, a different timeline where it seems like the crash never happened, but these characters are still managing to meet in, coincidental ways, all while we're following the characters on the island. So you're thinking to yourself, this is, before we get to that point, something's gonna get fixed, hopefully. And so season 6 plays like this, massive finale, but also with what this smoke is, the man in black, and, John Locke being the face of this thing, because Locke is dead, thanks to Linus, who believes the best way to get people back to the island who left in season 3 and 4 is if John Locke died, a sacrifice kind of thing, which doesn't really work the way I think Benjamin Linus was hoping for. And all of that is interesting, especially when you find some of the other survivors that seem to be on the island and another pocket of the island, and getting to learn more about Jacob and the Man in Black. Though I will say that origin story for them, that episode came way later than I was expecting. It was towards the end of the series. I was like, you should have pulled this up a little bit, but okay, fine, whatever. Especially because Jacob dies in the 5th season's ending, and it's like, okay, that's done then. And then you went and find out in like the opening of season 6, where it's like, oh, actual John Locke is dead. It's actually the persona that the smoke has taken on. It's actually like the face of John Locke. So now that Jacob is dead, someone has to run things. And so it seems like all of these people have been brought here for a reason. And there are some numbers that are assigned with them. Those are the same numbers that Hurley keeps seeing. And so it tries to bring that full circle as well. And it tries to also showcase how all of these characters have ended up in the spots that they have because Jacob chose them. Like, they were people who had been through a lot of stuff and they'd ended up over here. Something that Jacob believes in is second chances. And towards the end of the series, I feel like it really answers a lot of things when it comes to what all of this was for, and also sort of the point of the show. These characters, most of them, are not exactly having their best days in the sun. before they landed up over here. They've all been through some harsh stuff. And so having all of that, be sort of reconciled as the series has gone on. I mean, you have sympathy for characters like Sawyer, James Ford, if you will, who just didn't give a damn about anybody before. And so to have him suddenly be this, character you're really sympathetic towards, you're like, I hope nothing happens to this guy. And so someone has to run the place, and then Jack eventually signs up for that. But John is hell-bent on taking it all down. And so there's a very explosive finale that happens that was like 2 hours long almost. That was pretty something. But I want to talk about the very end, because I feel like this is the part that people get very dividing on. There's an age-old saying that you've heard a million times over, which is, it's about the journey, not the destination. Because at the end of the day, the destination for every human being is the exact same one. And when that happens, the thing that you want to look back on in those moments is everything that led up to that moment. That is what's more important. It's about that aspect of it. When you think of the entire show, and you think of the entirety of Lost, everything that's going on with these characters is a direct result of the things that have happened before that, but it's also about the journey that brought them to those moments. You're seeing how they're able to really find something with the island that they were not going to find otherwise beyond that. If everything had gone a certain way, in reality, these characters never meet. They don't get the chance to make these meaningful connections and really have something to look back on. It was all real. It was all as crazy as it gets. But they had a chance to just, have a story worth telling by the end of it. And so by the end of the show, some of these characters have had tragic deaths. For example, Saeed got blown up in the submarine bomb. Sun and Jin went down with the submarine after trying to reunite over almost 2 seasons, which was incredibly tragic. That might be the saddest moment of the entire show for me. That absolutely broke me. And Jack has taken a fatal stab of sorts too while trying to stop John Locke. So everyone's sort of come to the end times over here, but some characters managed to get out because of the other plane that brought them over here, especially with the pilot who was chartering the helicopter from the shipping rig, that being Frank Lapidus. And so some of them are able to get on that plane and get off the island. And so you get a bit of a moment, where you see that those guys got away. And Jack managed to save the island from going down as it's, shown image-wise in the start of season 6. So that didn't happen. And just to be able to watch that from the exact position where he was in when we first saw him in the middle of the bamboo field, it was a very poetic full circle moment. But also Vincent comes by, and it just makes it even better because Vincent is the first thing Jack sees when he wakes up in the bamboo field in episode 1 of season 1, and it's the final thing it's right next to him when he's dying. And it's like he's died, but as Christian Shepherd says in that limbo space, they didn't all die at once. Like, some have died before, some die eventually. And this is a space that they have built so that they can all find each other again. There is something so heartbreaking and emotionally powerful about that when I was watching that, I couldn't help but be moved. And it's why it's taken me so long to do this video, because I've been thinking about that over and over the last few days. That I had a really great time watching Lost. It was a wonderful experience, and I just wanted to share my thoughts on a lot of things that I saw with it, and tell you guys what I thought about it. And I was mentioning the DVD epilogue. I mean, it's nice to have a little bit more to what Linus and Hurley were up to after the fact, especially when it came to, shutting down the rest of the Dharma initiative and who would run the island after, because Jack hands it over to Hurley. And it is strongly implied that Walt might be running things later on, because Hurley is gone and so is Linus. Walt's not in the church space in that limbo afterlife thing. So that hasn't happened yet. Oh, I forgot to mention, I love the way that they all found each other. Like they're living different lives in that limbo, and then eventually, as these characters they meet each other, there's like this sense of touch or something that's said or a memory that like flashes back what was. This is one of those great shows. Absolutely, I stand with everyone else who has said that. It is really monumental stuff, and I'm glad I finally got to see it. I'm just so glad I finally managed to go on this journey, have none of it seemingly ruined for me. And yeah, I just want to share that with you guys. Guys, thank you very much for watching. If you have, it's been a lot of fun. As always, if you like this, guys, please do subscribe. Thank you very much once again. And
see you in another life, yeah?